In the deserts outside Mosul, 2006, a routine marine recon mission turned into a nightmare that defies explanation. A radio signal, supposedly dead since the Gulf War, started calling out, and it knew exactly where the soldiers were. Today, on Battlefield Secrets, we uncover the terrifying story of Operation Sandvale, a voice from 1991 that refused to die, haunting those who dared to answer. Stay with us, because what they discovered beneath the sands will chill you to the bone. The patrol had been standard, 8 hours of grid pattern movement through the barren outskirts of Mosul, temperature dropping fast with the dusk. The wind carried sand in thin, cutting ribbons, the kind that turned headlights into fog. Their Humvees moved in low gear, communication lines clear, static low, until the radio crackled once, briefly, with a frequency they weren't monitoring. Sergeant David Mitchell, team lead, leaned toward the comms receiver. The waveform didn't match insurgent chatter. It was faint, uneven, embedded under bursts of static like a half-forgotten recording. Corporal Reese adjusted the signal sweep, scanning for any trace of the source. The encryption pattern made him stop mid-adjustment. He checked it twice, then turned in his seat. "Sir, this code's from the old NATO Gulf War bands. It's not even in rotation anymore." The others looked up, first with disbelief, then mild unease. The static rose again, this time layered with a woman's voice. She spoke slowly, like someone pacing words between breaths. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Connolly. Request immediate extraction. Coordinates." The voice broke off, replaced by bursts of white noise. Mitchell exchanged a look with Reese. "Connolly?" he asked, though the name rang faintly familiar. Reese hesitated. "That name's in the 1991 Desert Storm casualty logs, sir. Hia, Southern Kuwait." For a moment, nobody spoke. Only the hum of the vehicle and the faint clatter of dust against the armored hull filled the silence. Mitchell ordered a lock on the direction. The team recalibrated the sinker's receiver, switching to narrowband and amplifying gain. The source fluctuated like a heartbeat, strong, then gone, then back again, each time closer. The equipment didn't show enemy jamming, no triangulation anomalies, no false signal bursts. It was as if someone was broadcasting from a moving point right across the sand, keeping pace with the convoy. Corporal Hayes, the youngest of the group, joked quietly, "Maybe it's just insurgent bait." Reese didn't laugh. "Insurgents don't spoof Cold War encryption, Hayes." The radio crackled again, longer, louder. The voice came through clearer now, as if standing right beside the mic. "USA Recon Patrol, this is Lieutenant Sarah Connolly. Please respond. I can see your lights." All 6 Marines froze. Mitchell's gaze shot toward the open window. Only darkness beyond, the endless expanse of pale dust. The night was empty, save for the wind, the faint glow of Mosul far behind them, and the static purring through the comms. The lieutenant's voice continued, calm now, deliberate. "Confirm coordinates, 36 degrees, 21 foot, north." Reese glanced down at the GPS pad. His stomach dropped. "That's us," he whispered. "That's exactly where we're sitting." Mitchell ordered radio silence, cutting transmission output. They switched to internal channel only. Reese checked the antenna. No sign of reflection or interference. Nothing in the logs indicated another broadcaster within a 50-kilometer radius. Yet the frequency persisted, weak but unwavering, like a thread tied around their position. The wind died down for the first time that night. Everything went unnaturally still. Even the hum of the generator seemed to fade. The radio hissed one last time before the voice returned. Closer, clearer, as if transmitted from inside the vehicle. "Coordinates received. Stay where you are." Mitchell's hand froze above the dial. He looked at his team, every face caught between disbelief and dread. The comms specialist swallowed. "Sir, what do we do?" No one answered. The only sound was the voice again, quieter now, almost intimate, whispering through the static. "Please, don't move. You're already where you're supposed to be." Outside, the desert stretched endless and still, black against a low silver sky. The voice asked for coordinates, theirs. The next entry in the incident file begins at 2:30 a.m. Wind direction east-northeast. Visibility reduced to 100 meters due to suspended sand particulates. Equipment function nominal, except for minor signal distortion on channel 4A. The patrol halted on a flat basin east of Mosul to re-establish signal direction and confirm the anomalous broadcast. Sergeant Mitchell ordered a full triangulation procedure. Corporal Reese unpacked the portable sinker's receiver, extending the whip antenna and switching to manual gain. Two others, Hayes and Pomeroy, were assigned to deploy secondary receivers at 50-meter intervals in a radial pattern. Standard operating procedure: isolate, triangulate, and confirm signal direction before movement. But the signal didn't behave. The moment they locked a bearing, the frequency drifted, just a few hertz off, then sharply back. It was like trying to pin a moving echo. The signal strength rose when they stepped north, then dropped to nothing. Move west, it came back stronger. Even the static had rhythm now, irregular bursts that sounded almost like breathing between the syllables. At 2:47 a.m., Reese reported instrument malfunction. The compass needles on both the analog and digital devices spun erratically, unable to stabilize. GPS uplink lost momentarily, returning with offset coordinates, showing the team 2 kilometers from their actual location. Mitchell requested a reset. Reese tapped the display, switched frequencies, recalibrated. Same result. The radio's tone altered subtly each time he adjusted the gain. Sometimes the woman's voice came through clear, desperate, urgent. Other times, it was calm, almost resigned. When Private Hayes radioed back from his position east of the convoy, he swore the voice wasn't female at all. It was a man's, whispering through heavy static. Pomeroy's report contradicted both. He heard something else entirely. "She's laughing," he said over the internal channel. "Like she knows something we don't." The entries that follow show confusion spreading like a silent contagion. None of the 6 Marines could agree on what the transmission said. Words changed mid-repeat. Tone shifted by location. Reese insisted it was still repeating coordinates, but Mitchell, reviewing the recordings later, noted that the numbers didn't match. Each man's version differed by several digits. By 3:10 a.m., the operation log shows increased equipment heat signatures. Battery packs drained at twice the expected rate. Reese recommended a temporary power down to prevent burnout, but Mitchell refused. He wanted at least one confirmed source before sunrise. He ordered all receivers online, synchronized manually. The desert fell silent, but for the hum of circuits, the occasional gust scraping sand against their boots. Then the signal steadied. For the first time that night, the voice was uniform across all channels. Clear, low, slow. "Proceed east," it said. "You're close." Mitchell checked the map. East led deeper into the basin, a featureless stretch of desert with no ruins, no comms towers, no known infrastructure. Still, he gave the order to prep vehicles. The signal's tone softened as if pleased. But as Reese made one last reading, the receiver's display spiked red, the gain maxing out, then flatlining. The source, according to every instrument they had, was directly under them. The Marines froze. Reese lifted the device and tapped it, thinking it a fault, but the tone grew louder, vibrating through the chassis, the floor of the Humvee, the sand beneath their boots. Pomeroy took a step back. "It's not east, Sarge. It's right under us." For a moment, no one moved. The desert wind fell completely still, as if holding its breath. Reese knelt and pressed his hand to the ground. The static throbbed through his palm like a pulse. Then the voice came again, so close it could have been inside his helmet. "Stay where you are." He staggered back, eyes wide. The map said east. The sound came from beneath their boots. At 3:40 a.m., Sergeant Mitchell ordered initiation of Echo Protocol, the standard operational response to suspected enemy signal interference or psychological operations, PSYOPs, transmissions. The team formed a perimeter around the 2 Humvees. Lights dimmed to blackout mode. The comms array was calibrated for isolation, bandwidth narrowed, encryption toggled to alpha lock sequence, power output reduced to limit signal bleed. Corporal Reese led the procedure. He cycled through each channel manually, verifying encryption headers, timing pulses, and authentication codes. The signal persisted, unaffected by suppression attempts. It maintained identical amplitude and pitch, independent of line of sight or antenna orientation. No thermal or electromagnetic signatures were detected in the surrounding 300-meter radius. At 3:47 a.m., a line test confirmed that the voice was transmitting within the same encrypted spectrum as USA military frequencies, impossible without access to pre-2000 authentication libraries, which had been purged and replaced after Desert Storm. According to the field logs, all known NATO encryption keys of that era had been archived offline for over a decade. Reese attempted an echo return, sending a low-volume challenge phrase, identify call sign, and position. The team's internal clocks recorded the transmission at exactly 3 hours, 48 minutes, and 12 seconds. The response was received at 3 hours, 48 minutes, and 10 seconds, 2 seconds before the question was sent. The anomaly was dismissed as a timestamp desynchronization. But when they repeated the test using synchronized GPS timing, the same effect occurred. The response preceded the query. Each subsequent test followed the same pattern. They transmitted. The voice answered first. Not a repetition, not a playback. Each reply corresponded exactly to their next sentence, as though anticipating it. At 3:50 a.m., Sergeant Mitchell contacted Forward Operating Base Falcon for command verification. HQ confirmed no active transmission on that frequency, no Allied personnel operating in the Mosul Basin, and no record of Lieutenant Sarah Connolly, whose voice was now clearly audible through the static. The officer on duty noted her file marked "Killed in Action" during a comms relay collapse outside Kuwait City, February 1991. Reese continued technical diagnostics. He ran interference mapping, checking for desert terrain refraction, tropospheric ducting, or multipath echo. But the data was inconsistent. Signal strength was stronger within the team's own perimeter than beyond it, as if the waves were bending inward instead of radiating out. Instruments displayed faint harmonics, mirror reflections of their own communications, originating from beneath the Humvee chassis and from the soil itself. At 3:58 a.m., Private Pomeroy was assigned to record all transmissions. His log entries capture the first moment where tone and meaning diverged from the team's perception. Mitchell, transmit, identify yourself. This is Sergeant Mitchell, 3rd Recon. Do you require assistance? Voice, receive, you already sent help. Seconds later, before any follow-up was transmitted, the voice added quietly, you shouldn't have come back. The phrase was not recorded by any other receiver. Only Pomeroy's headset caught it. His notes mention faint background noise, like boots scraping concrete, or the hollow echo of footsteps in a corridor. At 4:02 a.m., all power units were cycled down. Standard procedure dictated full shutdown for 10 minutes to clear residual interference. Yet even after systems went dark, the voice persisted in the earpieces, faint but intelligible, speaking through equipment no longer powered. Reese removed the headset, checked the circuits, and verified zero battery output. Still, the voice continued, whispering through what should have been dead metal. The final log of that night closes with an unverified entry. Time unsensed, frequency unlisted. It reads simply, all systems inactive. Transmission continues. Source proximity, indeterminate. Response interval, anticipatory. In the margin, Mitchell added one final note before the log cuts to black ink. It wasn't repeating. It was conversing. At 6 a.m., the team advanced west of the original intercept grid following the residual frequency path. The transmission had weakened but not vanished. The interpreter, Kareem al-Hassan, a 38-year-old former Iraqi army translator contracted by the USA coalition, identified the region by an older name, Wadi al-Na'am, the Valley of the Forgotten. He refused to step further into the sand basin, muttering a single phrase, Hism al-Ramal, or Sandvale. When pressed, Kareem explained that the locals believe the desert here remembers the dead and covers what should remain unseen. The Marines dismissed this as superstition, but as they descended into the basin, the landscape began to reflect the truth of the interpreter's words. The wind had carved shallow dunes into shapes resembling eroded faces, hollow eyes peering from beneath shifting drifts. The air carried a metallic tang, oxidized residue from old fuel, decomposing steel, and powderized sand. At 6:35 a.m., the first visual confirmation appeared, fragments of MRE packaging, USA issue, vintage 1990 to 1991. The markings had faded, but the serial codes were legible enough for temporal verification. 50 meters further, they uncovered the skeletal frame of a communications tent, its support poles warped and half consumed by corrosion. Inside lay a rusted field generator and disintegrated satellite dish, its NATO markings still faintly visible beneath the grit. The interpreter refused to enter the site perimeter, citing cursed sand. Sergeant Mitchell ordered a short-term survey. Corporal Reese began cataloging artifacts: torn uniforms, oxidized dog tags, shredded nylon cases. Several helmets still bore their rank insignia, though the faces they once protected had long been absorbed by the desert. At 7 a.m., a significant find, half buried under 2 feet of compacted sand. A Desert Storm Humvee, registration partially visible. USMC 45-1129. The vehicle's doors were open, the interior half filled with dust. The odometer read 118,042 miles. Its tires, however, displayed an incongruity noted immediately by Reese. The tread pattern was too sharp, too recent. Despite 15 years of environmental exposure, there were fresh tire marks leading east, out of the sand, and toward their current patrol route. No engine oil residue, no human footprints, no drag marks. The tire trail ended abruptly 50 meters away, merging into the wind's texture as though erased mid-motion. Mitchell ordered photographic evidence and GPS coordinates. The images later attached to the report confirmed the anomaly, a vehicle presumed destroyed in 1991 showing signs of recent use. Its fuel lines were intact, its ignition wires clean, yet the engine cavity was bone dry, showing no trace of fluid since its abandonment. At 7:15 a.m., while recording an inventory log, Pomeroy reported hearing movement beneath the sand, distant, muffled, like grinding metal. Instruments registered no seismic activity. The sound ceased when approached. HQ Command acknowledged the report but classified the findings under historical anomaly. The directive was to continue reconnaissance and avoid unnecessary disturbance of legacy debris. Before departing, Kareem, still standing at the basin's edge, spoke quietly in Arabic. "Some things buried do not die. They wait." When translated, the phrase was met with silence. No official record of that comment exists in the primary log. It was preserved only in the personal notebook of Corporal Reese, appended post-mission. The team covered the site per standard protocol. They left the Humvee as found, its windshield fractured, its mirrors glinting faintly in the dim desert sun. As they moved back toward their own convoy, the radio emitted a brief, low-pitched hum, 3 seconds, identical to the frequency used by Desert Storm-era emergency beacons. Then silence. Later, upon digital enhancement of their reconnaissance photos, analysts noted a faint reflection in the vehicle's side mirror, something resembling movement in the background, though no personnel were recorded present. The final entry of this log concludes with Reese's last notation, written without timestamp. "We found a graveyard of machines, and one of them had driven itself out." The past was moving again. At 8:10 a.m., the intercepted frequency spiked to maximum strength, locking into a narrow, localized range. Signal triangulation placed the origin point at grid 31Q, approximately 400 meters north of the team's previous encampment, an area marked on coalition maps as an abandoned Iraqi bunker complex, originally constructed during the Iran-Iraq War. Satellite imagery suggested partial collapse due to bombing during Desert Storm, later buried by natural dune migration. The signal's modulation carried low-frequency distortion layered beneath standard amplitude, indicative of analog-era radio transmissions rather than insurgent encryption. Corporal Pomeroy, communications specialist, confirmed modulation irregularities consistent with shortwave frequency bounce. When filtered, the static contained faint modulations resembling human breath patterns, as though someone was exhaling directly into the channel. Sergeant Mitchell ordered the team to initiate Contact Protocol Delta, standard for anomalous signal contact in an unsecured combat environment. The 6-man recon unit split into 2 flanking elements. Alpha, Mitchell, Reese, Pomeroy, approached from the South Ridge. Bravo, Lopez, Franklin, and Kareem advanced through the ravine to the north face of the collapsed bunker. 8:17 a.m. wind speed measured at 13 knots. Fine sand interference disrupted visual clarity. Particles reflected light from head-mounted IR systems, producing false positives across motion sensors. Sound carried inconsistently, Radio pings echoed several seconds longer than transmission duration, producing acoustic lag within the canyon walls. 8:21 a.m. Alpha Team reached the bunker's southern access. Structural scan via portable LiDAR revealed one accessible entryway. Height, 1.9 meters. Depth, unconfirmed due to collapse. Metallic distortion within walls suggested remnants of reinforced steel plating under layers of compacted silt. No active power signatures detected. Pomeroy established a thermal sweep perimeter, handheld FLIR scanning unit model and /PS 13D. Initial readings displayed 5 active heat sources, consistent with the unit's composition. On recalibration, the sensor registered a 6th thermal silhouette, human-sized, stationary, positioned directly behind Sergeant Mitchell. Mitchell ordered all members to halt movement. The figure remained fixed for 4 seconds before the screen flickered. Temperature readings dropped below baseline ambient desert level. Impossible under environmental conditions exceeding. Pomeroy rebooted the FLIR. The figure persisted. Reese confirmed visual negative. No one visible to the naked eye. At the same moment, Bravo team reported intermittent radio whispers on the open channel. The language was indeterminate, an overlap of English and Arabic phonemes, transcribed later by command linguists as, "Help. We are still inside." Kareem claimed to hear something different. His name. 8:26 a.m. The signal from the original frequency merged with short-range radio traffic, overriding internal comms. The voice of Lieutenant Sarah Connolly, confirmed earlier from audio records, returned, repeating a new phrase: sector secured, casualties contained. The exact phrasing matched a Desert Storm transmission documented from February 27, 1991, the day Connolly's unit was declared missing near Basra. Mitchell attempted manual override to shut down comms interference. During the attempt, Reese, positioned nearest the bunker entrance, reported pressure displacement, as if air was being drawn inward. Sand around the entryway began to shift, forming shallow patterns resembling footprints leading into the buried structure. When Bravo regrouped with Alpha, Pomeroy displayed the latest thermal scan. The 6th figure now stood within the formation, identical size, heat signature, and posture as the other Marines. It faced forward, head slightly inclined, maintaining spacing consistent with military march formation. Mitchell conducted a physical head count, 5 personnel present. No additional footprints were observed on the sand between formations. Command requested live feed via helmet cam uplink, but the footage transmitted blank frames for 10 consecutive seconds before resuming normal visual data. During those 10 seconds, comms captured one line of audio, breath on the open mic, followed by a whisper, "Don't look behind you." 8:29 a.m. The signal strength spiked again, then dropped abruptly to 0. The final entry for this phase of the operation, compiled later by debriefing officers, records Sergeant Mitchell's closing statement, delivered under oath. "We were 5. The scanners said 6. The 6th didn't move when we did. It waited. And when the light hit the sand, its shadow stood with ours." The file ends there, followed by the redacted note. Someone else was standing among them. At 9:15 a.m., after establishing perimeter security, the unit's sinkers-equipped Humvee, callsign Vanguard 3, was used as a central reference point for the concentrated signal detected in prior sweeps. Corporal Pomeroy, acting as comms and EOD liaison, initiated a metal detector sweep of the surrounding sand within a 5-meter radius. Signal intensity peaked directly under the vehicle's shadow. The desert surface, compacted over 15 years by wind and sporadic vehicle traffic, showed no obvious disturbance. Pomeroy instructed a small team, Mitchell, Reese, and Lopez, to carefully excavate using standard EOD sand shovels and fiberglass probes to avoid electromagnetic interference. Each scoop was cataloged and cross-referenced against the GPS grid to maintain positional integrity for post-operation forensic analysis. At 9:23 a.m., a metallic outline was discernible approximately 60 centimeters beneath the Humvee. The object's dimensions matched a PRC-77 field transceiver, widely issued during Desert Storm, serial numbers indicating manufacture in 1989. The casing was partially corroded but largely intact, encased in hardened sand and dust accumulation that preserved internal components. Mitchell ordered disconnection of the Humvee battery to prevent accidental short circuits. Pomeroy examined the device. Battery compartment contained the original BA 4386 rechargeable pack, expired officially in 1992. External inspection revealed no signs of external power adaptation or replacement. Despite this, when the operator keyed the push-to-talk button, the transceiver powered on instantly, displaying channel 14 in preset Gulf War frequency mode. Static hiss filled the cabin, followed by a distinct female voice, clear, calm, and undeniably alive, articulating in precise English with a Gulf War-era phonetic accent. "You finally came back." The team froze. Mitchell conducted a rapid visual head count. 6 personnel presents. The voice paused, then resumed, responding directly to questions before they were fully formed, demonstrating latency impossible under standard communication protocols. The Humvee's headlights carved sharp shadows into surrounding dunes. The buried transceiver appeared self-powered, showing no measurable current draw from the vehicle or auxiliary equipment. Pomeroy recorded multiple readings. Electromagnetic field within the unit exceeded expected parameters for the BA 43 by 27%, though no external power source was detected. Lopez noted condensation forming on the device's surface despite arid ambient temperature, as if the transceiver exhaled moisture. Attempts to disconnect and remove it to a safe distance failed. The device began to emit audio feedback proportional to proximity. Moving it more than 2 meters caused the voice to intensify, repeating names and coordinates of each Marine. Mitchell instructed a tactical pause. Reese documented all serial numbers, sand stratification layers, and orientation relative to Humvee chassis for archival purposes. Each action was cataloged meticulously, maintaining archival, post-incident protocol. Psychological observations. Marines reported auditory hallucinations, phrases in Arabic, fragmented sentences, sometimes spoken simultaneously with Connolly's voice. All logs indicated consistent hearing between personnel, suggesting an anomalous phenomenon rather than individual hallucination. At 9:35 a.m., the final extraction maneuver was completed. Transceiver was lifted from sand and secured on the Humvee roof. The device remained active and responsive, voice repeating phrases as though it had been awaiting the unit's arrival. Post-recovery analysis in situ concluded battery expiration, environmental degradation, and lack of external power could not account for device activation. Connolly's voice persisted on channel 14, correlating with prior intercepted frequencies from the 1991 Gulf War, demonstrating continuity beyond physical and temporal constraints. The voice said, "You finally came back." Signal logs and forensic photographs indicate this as the first confirmed physical interaction with the anomaly directly beneath the Humvee. All equipment readings remain classified. At 10:15 a.m., all active radios and transceivers aboard Vanguard 3 were powered down in accordance with protocol to isolate the anomalous signal detected beneath the Humvee. Each Marine confirmed shutdown of sinkers, PRC, 117F, and handheld LRES-linked devices. The desert wind continued, low and insistent, across the sand-swept perimeter. Immediately, an audible static filled the interior of each soldier's combat helmet. Initially interpreted as residual interference, the comms officer, Corporal Pomeroy, ran spectrum analyses using a handheld analyzer. No active transmission could be traced. Antennas registered no inbound or outbound signals. Despite this, the static persisted, localized directly in the auditory channels of their headsets. Within 30 seconds, individual Marines reported hearing distinct phrases embedded in the static. These phrases did not originate from any source outside the helmets. Sergeant Mitchell heard his own words from earlier, slightly distorted, repeated in a rhythm inconsistent with his own speech. Private Lopez reported hearing phrases in Arabic, addressed directly to him with knowledge of his recent patrol movements. Specialist Reese recognized his deceased team member's call sign, Hawk 1, spoken in a voice matching memories of field deployment. Panic began to escalate. Marines attempted to remove helmets and cut all power, but the feedback persisted. Attempts to shield audio channels with Faraday cage procedures proved ineffective. Each new attempt to communicate resulted in the static echoing personalized distortions of their own phrases, sometimes predictive. When one said, "Check the perimeter," the static responded in near-perfect timing, completing the sentence before it was fully spoken. The team's formation collapsed as discipline broke down. Tactical signals failed. Hand gestures and prearranged silent codes were mirrored with an unsettling delay, causing confusion. Corpsmen reported palpitations and sweating, indicating acute psychological stress. Log entries denote these as first recorded instances of sensorium intrusion, where auditory perception is hijacked by unknown phenomena without any physical signal source. Factual elements noted during the event. Electronic feedback anomalies were consistent with known Helmholtz resonance patterns, yet frequencies reported were outside measurable bandwidths for standard helmet comms. Military procedure for radio shutdown and channel isolation was correctly followed. All gear tested post-event showed no active emitters. Terrain features, including compacted dunes and Humvee metal chassis, were cross-referenced. No reflective anomalies could explain personal audio tracking. By 10:32 a.m., the voice, recognized as Lieutenant Sarah Connolly, began addressing individual Marines using personal data and deceased comrades' call signs. Log transcription shows phrases such as, "Hawk 1, why did you leave me? Mitchell, turn back, it's too late." Despite commands to regroup and suppress fear, each soldier heard unique variants of the static, compounding confusion. Pomeroy noted that normal acoustic isolation techniques failed. Sound appeared to originate inside their helmets and auditory cortex rather than the environment. Archival observation. The signal was now inside the team. End of entry note. The anomaly demonstrates direct psychological and auditory intrusion. Immediate containment, further research, and secure extraction of all personnel and equipment are recommended. The integrity of perception among unit members cannot be guaranteed, and operational safety is compromised. At 4 a.m., the intelligence section compiled archival files pertaining to Lieutenant Sarah Connolly, linguist assigned to a forward translation outpost during Desert Storm, 1991. Connolly's mission reports, partially redacted, referenced an operation code named Sandvale, describing unusual intercepted transmissions from southern Iraqi desert coordinates now consistent with 2006 Mosul grid data. According to recovered logs, Connolly's team detected signals unlike any known human language, despite containing phonemes traceable to Arabic, Farsi, and minor dialects. She documented phrases appearing to be voices beneath the dunes, often echoing human emotion but exhibiting structure and repetition incompatible with terrestrial speech patterns. Notations emphasize her distress. The language is unknown. Patterns suggest cognition, yet it is not local. The dunes carry it everywhere, like a memory embedded in sand. Satellite imagery and field recon reports from 1991 confirm the coordinates match the abandoned village outskirts currently under investigation. Vehicles and temporary encampments used during Desert Storm have since eroded beneath drifting sands, leaving only skeletal remains of tents, Humvees, and field antennas. The recon unit cross-referenced Connolly's encrypted audio logs with current 2006 recordings intercepted under the Humvee. Analysts noted verbatim repetition of the phrases she documented 15 years prior. Words like "Hawk 1, you shouldn't have left me," and "turn back, it's still beneath the sand," were not only identical but intoned with the same pauses and stress markers, suggesting a temporal continuity in transmission. Investigation of historical communications shows Connolly's mission utilized field sinkers radios and secure NATO frequencies. Logs indicate she attempted triangulation of the source, but signal paths consistently shifted, preventing accurate localization. Her notes describe, "Every attempt to locate it ends where we began. It moves like the desert itself, alive, aware of our presence." Analysis reveals the 2006 team is encountering the same pattern of non-local transmissions, correlating directly with Connolly's observations. While some skeptics suggested equipment failure or misinterpretation in 1991, multiple cross-referenced witness statements and archival audio confirm her findings. Psychological evaluation of 2006 personnel indicate early symptoms consistent with Connolly's post-mission notes: elevated stress, auditory fixation, and perception of speech originating within individual helmets rather than external sources. Cognitive logs from both periods highlight mirrored emotional response, suggesting the anomaly interacts directly with human consciousness. Operational recommendations stress caution. The signal exhibits properties defying linear time, repeating past phrases with exact fidelity. Analysts note that attempting direct engagement risks deepening perceptual intrusion. Field notes conclude, the voice she recorded is not gone. It is here, and it knows us as it knew her. Ending archival notation. Time hadn't passed. It had circled. The team initiated descent at 3:10 a.m., excavating a shallow entrance leading into an artificially sealed tunnel system beneath the sand dunes. The initial breach revealed compacted earth, reinforced with fragments of desert storm debris, metal struts, broken antennas, and deteriorating canvas remnants, suggesting prior military engineering unknown to current charts. Atmospheric sensors immediately registered degraded conditions. Oxygen levels dropped to 15%. Night vision goggles, calibrated for low-light desert operations, barely penetrated the suspended dust motes, creating a halo around each LED marker. The comms officer reported repeated brief static bursts in sinkers channels, though signal analysis confirmed no external transmission. The Marines employed combat engineer protocols for tunnel navigation, rope markers, tactile wall mapping, and triangulated pace counting. Each corridor averaged 1.2 meters wide, forcing single-file movement, while dust-laden air reduced visibility to less than 3 meters. The echo profile was irregular. Every step produced delayed, overlapping reverberations, consistent with convoluted tunnel geometry, but audible tones occasionally carried speech-like cadence. During a preliminary sweep, the squad leader noted a faint, rhythmic hum. It was low frequency, almost imperceptible, yet resonated through helmets and chest rigs like a collective heartbeat. Attempts to isolate it with portable sonar detectors produced inconsistent readings. Frequencies seemed to bend around solid walls, violating expected acoustic behavior. At 3:18 a.m., Private Ramirez spoke over helmet comms, confirming, "I heard something, my own voice answering me." All transmissions were cross-checked. The system registered zero outbound audio, confirming hallucination or anomaly. Subsequent steps revealed repetition of previous dialogue, altered in tone and phrasing, sometimes inverting questions into statements. Dust disturbed by boots formed transient clouds that momentarily obscured physical reality, compounding disorientation. Command logs indicate a 3-minute interval in which the team paused movement, each Marine reporting a sense of being watched from multiple unseen angles. Airflow analysis revealed no pressure differentials or mechanical sources to account for the shifting echoes. Tunnel mapping proceeded using laser rangefinders and tactile survey tools, but corridors looped in unpredictable patterns. Memory logs from each soldier diverged slightly, suggesting perceptual distortion intensified with isolation, though all units remained in physical proximity. The eerie hum continued, now interspersed with fragmented phrases, some recognizable from prior transmissions. Hawk 1, you shouldn't have left me. Come deeper. Investigative notes record that, despite all standard checks, communications remained silent, yet the team responded to the voices instinctively. Several soldiers reported hearing their own statements returned in altered forms, contradicting both intention and timing. Psychological evaluation later would suggest temporal and auditory hallucinations consistent with high-stress subterranean environments, though no definitive physiological explanation exists. Environmental hazards, dust inhalation, oxygen deprivation, unstable tunnel walls were documented in parallel with the anomalous phenomena, ensuring operational continuity. Logs emphasize methodical recording of every echo, vibration, and visual anomaly. Their own words came back wrong. Sergeant Mitchell initiated waveform comparison at 4:15 a.m., isolating the recording retrieved from the buried Desert Storm-era transceiver beneath their Humvee. The initial playback revealed distorted static and faint traces of Lieutenant Sarah Connolly's voice, but careful spectral analysis indicated perfectly aligned speech cadences with his own recent field communications. Every pause, inflection, and micro-hesitation matched with unerring precision. Mitchell documented the anomalies in a forensic log, noting amplitude envelopes and temporal offsets. Despite the recording predating his deployment by 15 years, his own phonetic patterns mirrored Lieutenant Connolly's intonations, down to slight stammering when reading operational codes. Signal plots on the oscilloscope showed near-perfect superimposition of vowel lengths and consonant articulation markers, defying known audio physics. The team observed the playback through blue-lit monitoring stations, each helmet capturing real-time audio with minimal latency. The ambient hum of power converters and ventilation blended with the low-frequency rumble of the desert night, creating the sensation that the sound was emanating not just from the recording, but from the walls around them. Mitchell's pulse, recorded via wrist sensor, escalated slightly as he realized the voice began anticipating his next statements, repeating sentences moments before he verbalized them. He attempted a procedural experiment, reciting coordinates and call signs, while pausing to allow the playback to continue. Each time, the recording diverged slightly, inserting phrases he had not spoken, questions he had not asked. The waveform graphs exhibited deviations from the expected template. The signal seemed reactive rather than static, predicting and then manipulating speech content. Analytical notes documented the impossibility of causality. Communication engineers confirmed that the transceiver's battery had expired decades ago. The desert terrain could not account for predictive signal behavior. Each repetition of phrases revealed nuanced emotional cues, rising from neutral static into urgent, pleading intonations identical to Mitchell's stress patterns. The archival tone of the log remained clinical, detached, yet the psychological impact on Mitchell is apparent in handwritten notes. "It hears me before I even speak." The team conducted redundancy checks, isolating channels, and verifying frequency integrity. No artificial loops or feedback systems could account for the preemptive mimicry. At 4:28 a.m., Mitchell documented the final test, reading a string of alphanumeric codes while recording. The playback anticipated the sequence with sub-second lead, then appended words not yet conceived. The investigative report emphasizes, procedural repetition yields no logical explanation, suggesting either an unknown environmental phenomenon or a persistent anomaly tied to Lieutenant Connolly's disappearance. It knew what he'd say next and what he wouldn't. At 5:30 a.m., the recon team approached a partially buried structure identified via satellite imagery and anomalous radio readings. The coordinates corresponded to remnants of a Desert Storm-era forward operations bunker, largely engulfed by shifting sands. Exposed concrete was pockmarked, sand-filled, and corroded by decades of weathering. Rusted steel reinforcements protruded from fractured walls, and fragments of camouflage netting clung to supports. Upon entry, the team documented skeletal remains arranged in what appeared to be an operational formation. Each skeleton wore a Desert Storm-issued headset, some partially fused to the cranium by rust and mineral deposits. Paper logs were scattered, water-damaged, and illegible, yet fragments indicated call signs, coordinates, and partial cipher notes. The headsets, astonishingly, emitted faint static that fluctuated with the team's proximity. The narrative tone is deliberately clinical. Sergeant Mitchell and the team meticulously recorded each skeleton's position, documenting bone structure, uniform remnants, and radio equipment condition. Notes emphasized frequency contamination. Proximity to the headsets caused brief auditory hallucinations among soldiers, echoes of their own voices or partial fragments of past communications. The bunker's architecture aligns with known forward-deployed Desert Storm designs: reinforced walls, low ceilings, minimal ventilation, and a subterranean layout optimized for command and control. Equipment was cataloged, including rusted sinkers radios and signal amplifiers, confirming active usage at the time of Desert Storm. Despite decades, the headset's components, microphones and earpieces, still conducted faint electrical signals, though no external power source was detected. Atmosphere in the bunker is oppressive: cold concrete, shifting dust, and reflected light from flashlight beams bounce across bone and rusted metal, creating phantom movement in the peripheral vision. The forensic team noted a subtle resonance in the headsets, a low hum that seemed to sync with heartbeats, creating dissonant sensory feedback. Psychological horror manifests as team members report fleeting phrases, partially intelligible, matching their own thoughts or speech patterns, suggesting some form of auditory contagion through residual radio signals. The skeletal occupants appear frozen mid-communication, mouths slightly agape as if continuing transmissions posthumously. Field notes stress the eerie continuity of the signal. It crossed decades, linking the 1991 operators to the 2006 recon team. Attempts to isolate frequencies yielded nothing. The static appeared reactive, amplifying in intensity when the team tried to record or broadcast. The final observation, carefully logged in the archival report, reads, "Their mouths were open, as if still speaking." At 4:15 a.m., personnel reported temporal irregularities within the immediate perimeter. Standard chronometers ceased progression. Digital clocks froze at 4:13 a.m. GPS units reversed coordinates, suggesting motion counter to recorded traversal. Field entries note lapsing memory intervals of approximately 3 to 7 minutes. The recon team maintained log discipline, but repeated entries appeared duplicated across multiple terminals. Field communications with command yielded identical reports, transmitted simultaneously despite internal timestamps indicating intervals of hours. Analysis flagged the anomaly. Duplicate logs contain subtle divergences in phrasing and call signs, suggesting conflicting perception of the same events. During operational checks, two separate entries listed Sergeant Mitchell performing identical maneuvers in the same location, with both logs documenting standard operational commands. Comparison revealed minute but significant differences. One Mitchell references a northern approach to the bunker, the other a southern. Both logs were sent to command, appearing simultaneously on the same server. Atmosphere within the perimeter reflects escalating disorientation. Sandstorms shift unnaturally, day and night alternate without warning, and shadows extend and retract independently of light sources. Equipment monitors, compass, GPS, digital chronometers oscillate rapidly, failing to synchronize with each other. Narrative tone remains archival, observations recorded as if in a post-incident analysis. Officers note cognitive strain. Soldiers report confusion over sequences of prior events, recollecting actions never taken. Attempts to establish visual confirmation of teammates fail. Optical illusions occur at peripheries, compounded by intermittent radio static. Factual elements remain grounded. GPS drift under high electromagnetic interference, delayed logging due to network redundancy, and standard USA Marine reporting procedures. Even under extreme environmental distortion, recon protocols persist. Check-ins every 15 minutes, recording of all anomalies, maintenance of tactical awareness. Psychological horror emerges from overlapping realities. One soldier sees his leader performing actions he knows he just performed himself, while audio logs capture both versions speaking in tandem, indistinguishable from original field recordings. Personal identifiers, such as call signs and verbal tics, overlap across logs, creating perceptual duplication. Final notation in the archival report emphasizes the horror of doubled reality. There were now two transmissions, and only one could be real. By 6:20 a.m., the recon team had shifted focus from physical anomalies to the content of the persistent broadcast. Standard audio recordings were fed into the mobile decrypt console. The interpreter, Corporal Reyes, initiated phonetic analysis using archived Desert Storm linguistic datasets. Initial transcription suggested partial intelligibility, halting English words interlaced with recurring non-standard phonemes, producing a cadence familiar yet alien. The message's syntactic structure mirrored prior field observations. Pauses corresponded to previous soldier movements. Rising intonations matched respiration rates, and even the embedded pitch suggested awareness of environmental shifts. Using comparative analysis with 1991 transmission logs, Reyes isolated linguistic echoes, phonetic fragments of Lieutenant Connolly's original speech, interwoven with emergent patterns that did not conform to known Arabic or English phonology. Narrative focus remains forensic. The interpreter logs every phonetic anomaly, noting consistent repetition across multiple playback iterations. Each iteration highlights a structural symmetry, reinforcing the impression of deliberate encoding rather than random interference. Using IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, transcription, the team begins to perceive a coherent semantic overlay within the chaotic signal. Atmosphere is tense and confined. The tent's interior is illuminated by a single flickering lantern. Sand intrudes through seams, settling on laptops and transceiver panels. Static hums in the background. Pages of phonetic transcriptions scatter in the wind. The team works in near silence, punctuated only by the clicking of keyboards and intermittent voice confirmations from Reyes. Factual elements: field linguistics, phonetic code analysis, military encryption from Gulf War-era communications, signal processing. Reyes references archived tapes, comparing patterns with Desert Storm voice recordings, confirming identity markers of Lieutenant Connolly embedded within the transmission. Psychological horror emerges as the content's meaning crystallizes. The interpreter whispers the translation, "We are the recording." This revelation reframes prior anomalies. The desert itself becomes a repository of sound, not a haunted site, but a medium that preserves and echoes every human transmission. The team realizes the signal is reactive. It knows their actions, predicts responses, and folds their own words into its memory. Each soldier now experiences a profound temporal dislocation, hearing their own speech, distorted and repeated, as if the desert archives consciousness itself. The report concludes with a chilling note emphasizing the inversion of perception. They weren't hearing ghosts. The ghosts were hearing them. At approximately 9:15 a.m., reconnaissance logs indicate a structural failure in the subterranean sand tunnels beneath the encampment. The earth gave way without warning, swallowing the team's Humvees, portable generators, and field equipment into an undulating maw of sand. Initial sensor readings became irretrievably corrupted. Radios fused with sand, transceivers overloaded, and night vision optics rendered opaque by fine particulate matter. Narrative focus centers on environmental catastrophe and total sensory disorientation. Each Marine's personal log captures fragmented observations: the roar of shifting sand, metallic screams of collapsing equipment, and air pressure fluctuations that obscure respiration and hearing. The standard operational grid fails. The tunnels themselves appear to shift, swallowing exit points and disorienting spatial orientation. Atmosphere: absolute darkness, punctuated only by occasional sparks from overloaded electrical equipment. Dust and sand swirl violently, embedding in uniforms, weapons, and radios. Sound behaves unpredictably. Voices echo, distort, and overlap, creating the impression of multiple speakers in different locations. Voice tone: detached and forensic, but fragmented as the report reflects data corruption and loss of chronological cohesion. Logs include interrupted sentences, partial timestamps, and contradictory positional readings. Each entry documents attempts at emergency extraction, detailing efforts to recover personnel using standard search and rescue protocols under extreme desert sand collapse physics. Factual elements: tunnel collapse mechanics, sand density and flow under stress, gear malfunctions under particulate load, emergency extraction limitations in unstable subterranean structures. Despite training, the team struggles with repeated dislocation and vanishing reference points, making coordinated movement impossible. Psychological horror intensifies as the team realizes the phenomenon extends beyond environmental threat. Each soldier experiences visions of another team member's death as if relived in first person. Audio logs record Lieutenant Connolly's voice merging with their own, overlaying each Marine's panic with a calm, commanding intonation. The surviving voices on the field recorder convey both memory and prediction, blending human perception with a residual consciousness of Connolly herself. The sand was speaking in her voice now. This denotes a total loss of separation between human, environment, and memory. Connolly's essence persists within the sand, transforming the desert into a sentient archive capable of replaying, merging, and distorting the lived experiences of those who enter its depths. Sergeant Mitchell was the sole survivor extracted from the field after the collapse of the sand tunnels beneath the abandoned Mosul village. He arrived at the secure facility at 7:30 a.m., exhibiting acute amnesia, tremors, and disorientation. All standard debriefing procedures were enacted: verbal recounting, polygraph examination, and preliminary psychological assessment. His reports were fragmented, sentences incomplete, often repeating details as if reliving moments in real time. Narrative focus centers on post-operation analysis, trauma study, and classified containment measures. Observers noted that despite isolation from active frequencies, the same distress signal intercepted in the field activated within the secure debriefing room. The audio did not echo past recordings. Instead, it whispered Mitchell's own debrief in real time, mimicking cadence, hesitation, and emotional inflection. Atmosphere: fluorescent-lit interrogation room, sterile and empty, blank walls reflecting cold light. The faint hum of a radio, seemingly powered off, vibrating in synchrony with his pulse. Shadow of prior events lingered in the stillness. Every movement of Mitchell's pen, every shallow breath, seemed to synchronize with the phantom broadcast. Voice tone: reflective, cold, investigative, like an analyst compiling a post-mortem operational record, cataloging every anomaly and procedural deviation. The narrative maintains detachment despite the psychological horror evident in Mitchell's responses. Factual elements: military debrief structure, classified psychological evaluation, secure radio monitoring, and satellite telemetry analysis. Multiple attempts to trace the signal confirmed faint broadcasts emanating from the original Mosul desert coordinates, perfectly synchronized with Mitchell's biometric data, including heart rate and voice cadence. Psychological horror escalates as Mitchell realizes the signal persists beyond containment, creating a direct link between past and present. He is caught in a feedback loop where the voice he pursued in the desert now mirrors his own reporting, blurring the line between operator and operated. Analysts observing his vitals report synchronized micro-expressions: fear, recognition, and resignation mirrored by the audio output. The radio kept calling even after they turned it off. The watchers of Sandvale remain, and they are still transmitting. The ending implies that the phenomenon is not bound by physical constraints or temporal limitations. The desert, the signal, and Connolly's consciousness persist as a sentient recording system, capable of interacting with human subjects indefinitely. Mitchell's survival is rendered ambiguous, not just physical, but existential, as he remains haunted and partially absorbed into the unending broadcast. Sergeant Mitchell returned, but the signal didn't. The radio kept calling, echoing his own heartbeat, proving that the desert remembers, and the watchers of Sandvale are still transmitting. This isn't just a story of war. It's a story of the unseen horrors that linger long after the battles are over. If this story gave you chills, leave a like, share it with a fellow history or horror fan, and comment below. Would you have answered the call? And don't forget to subscribe to Battlefield Secrets for more untold stories from the front lines of history.